Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British road journey. This week I'm still in West Sussex, a county that seems to exist so that people have somewhere to live. It's not apparent as to what the county has contributed towards society, but maybe today we'll find out because we'll be taking a journey across the county from Horsham to Bognor Regis, which sounds disgusting. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and we'll try not to upset any security types this week. We begin in Horsham, a town that in the days of my guidebook had around 12,000 residents, so a fairly busy place. It was mostly a market town, but for 200 years Horsham was home to the King & Sons brewery, and I like beer. Unfortunately, the original brewery is now a housing estate. Another long-standing industry in Horsham is Warnham and Wealden Brickworks, which is found to the north of the town. Horsham sits on a certain type of clay that's particularly useful for making bricks, and whilst the site has changed over the years, bricks have been manufactured here in one way or another since the early 20th century. Today, the brickworks is owned by a company called Wienerberger. Oh dear. And they dig out the clay that they need from a quarry a short distance from the work site, and it's transported via conveyor belts. And that resulted in this, a bridge over a road. But it's not a bridge for people. The bridge carries the conveyor belt over the road, which in turn moves the dugout clay. It's not a particularly nice structure to look at, but I just thought it was interesting. My guidebook suggests that perhaps we'd like to visit the Torque Moto Cafe, an automotive and motorcycle themed cafe. Okay, it doesn't say that because of course in the old days it didn't exist, but who cares? It's a short distance from our conveyor belt bridge, and assuming the owners have given me permission, I'll be showing you some B-roll shots of their fantastic venue. In any case, I'm enjoying a lovely cup of coffee, which of course is a vital prop for the making of this video and is therefore tax deductible. Cheers. If you're passing this way, have a look around the cafe because there's a very rare exclusive Auto Shenanigans lanyard hiding somewhere. Having grown up a bit, it's time to move on to our next destination, the town of Southwater. Using my motorised vehicle, we'll have to use a mix of both old roads and new. Effectively, we'll be trying to follow the route of the A24 as it was back in the old days, but in places it's been upgraded and replaced by a dual carriageway. For example, this stretch of abandoned road was replaced by the Horsham bypass. It used to be the A24, but it's now known as Dokes Hill, and it runs for about half a mile or so. I wasn't able to determine if there'd be anything interesting left over from when it was a main road, but I shall have a look around and report my findings. There's f*** all. Some more abandoned road can be found in the centre of Southwater. In this case, it's a disused road bridge. Until the late 2000s, the main road used to run right through here, but following redevelopment in the area, things had to change for access reasons. The bridge used to carry the road over a railway, and at one point the location of Southwater railway station would have been found where today we find a road junction. Both the railway and the station were closed as part of the beaching cuts in the 1960s. To be fair, the railway in Southwater was mainly used to serve the Southwater Brickworks. In those days, the town was more brickworks than it was town, and indeed it doesn't get a mention in my guidebook, presumably because of its small size. The Brickworks was set up in 1890 on land that today is known as Southwater Country Park, and they produced an engineering brick that was used extensively in the construction of London's sewer network. At the height of operations, they were producing around 18 million bricks per year, some of which apparently made it all the way to Australia to be used in the construction of the Woomera launch site, a military rocket testing site, and later used to develop rockets for space travel. Fair enough, but nothing will ever be as fast as my Saab diesel, which we will use to head to our next destination, the town of Midhurst. To get there, we can use the A272, which is pretty much the same as the old days, and this will take us through a place called Coolham, where I found something of interest. This is, or was, Coolham Airfield, a hastily built temporary airfield that was constructed in 1943 to support the D-Day landings, and is one of several sites that were set up for such reasons due to its close proximity to Europe. The idea was for the airfield to be built as quickly as possible. Whilst runways were installed, the longest being the east-to-west runway at 1,372 metres, they weren't proper solid runways, and instead they were built using Sommerfeld tracking. This is where a wire steel sort of mesh is pushed into the ground and it reinforces it, allowing for larger vehicles such as aircraft to land on it without sinking into the ground. But the main benefit is that it was very quick to install and temporary. Given the temporary nature of the airfield, there isn't much to give away what used to be here, but a lot of the perimeter track still remains and today is used as a public path trail thing. Up next is the town of Midhurst. In the days of my guidebook, it was probably considered a small village with only around 1,900 residents, but today there are over 5,000 people living here, so it's safe to say Midhurst is a town. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Cowdray ruins, and whilst we make our way there, we can also make a stop at Midhurst Castle. Or at least the site of the castle anyway. It was first established as a wooden fortress in the year 1066 and later replaced by a stone fortification in the 12th century, which is believed to have been in operation for only 100 years before it was abandoned. Today we can see the outlines of the buildings that used to be here. But these are pretend. Whilst they look like the remains of an old castle foundation, they were installed in the early 1900s to demonstrate where the building's outlines would have been. As for the ruins recommended by my guidebook, these are found next door to the old castle site, and apparently the ruins are what's left of an early Tudor house. I love English history sometimes. It was once visited by King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I. So? Anyway, what was previously a lovely house constructed in the 1520s was destroyed during a fire in 1793. Its remains are now a grade-listed structure, meaning it needs to be preserved as best as possible, and accordingly the whole thing is fenced off to visitors because we can't be trusted. Yeah, that's probably fair enough, so let's move on to our next destination, which is only a short distance from Midhurst. All we have to do is nip down the A286 and we'll find the unfortunately named village of Cocking. Cocking. Grow up, we haven't got time for that. Cocking is a tiny village that, according to the last census, had 420 residents. Nice. But this doesn't interest me. What does interest me is the now abandoned limeworks found to the south of the village that can trace its beginnings as far back as 1715. The remains of the chalk crusher and the lime kilns that we see today aren't quite that old. These were built sometime between the 1940s and 1980s. Extending from the kiln area are the leftovers of an old access road. I say leftovers loosely. If we were to follow this along, it'll take us to another part of the site, which is this, the main chalk quarry area. In the early days of the limeworks, this quarry didn't exist, and instead small bits of chalk were dug out by hand in the vicinity of the lime kilns. But as time went on and machinery got better, the entire hillside was excavated for chalk. Interestingly, between the 1920s and 1950s, an aerial ropeway system was used to transport the dug-out rock from the quarry up to the kilns for processing. Later on, the access road that I mentioned would be built so that it could be used by vehicles and a conveyor belt system, resulting in the aerial ropeway system being dismantled. Time to head to our final destination. On the way, we'll pass through Chichester, but we're not stopping because you can't fly a drone around here and I can't be bothered. So we'll aim for the A259, which certainly has changed over the years. It's had all of its corners smoothed out, no doubt in the interests of safety. Welcome to Bognor Regis, or Bognor as it was in the days of my guidebook. Back then, Bognor would have been seen as one of the top holiday resorts in England, and with a population of over 11,000, it was certainly a busy place. The whole seaside resort town thing kicked off for Bognor in the late 18th century when a guy called Richard Hotham decided that Bognor no longer needed to be a quiet fishing village, and he set about turning it into said seaside resort. Things really took off in the 1860s with the arrival of the railway, which brought thousands of tourists to the town, allowing for it to expand rapidly. But when it comes to tourism in Bognor, there's only one name that you need to know, and it's Billy Butlin.
Butlin, Butlin, Butlin by the sea. There's a holiday that's full of fun for Mum and Dad and everyone at Butlin's by the sea.
Butlins has existed in the town since 1930, but the famous Butlins holiday camp was constructed throughout the 1950s and would open in 1960. At its peak, every Saturday 6,000 guests would arrive to check in, and at the same time 6,000 guests would check out. Absolute chaos. Amazingly though, it must have worked because they're still in business today. Butlins in Bognor welcomes 385,000 guests a year and is one of the key employers in the town. If you take a walk along the beach at Bognor, you might spot this relic from the 1939 to 1945 Second Small Disagreement. It only appears at low tide, so you have to time it right, which I didn't. Shit. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care, bye bye.